A party of divers traveled to the Galapagos Islands on February 12, 2010, to go diving. When one of the divers was overcome by powerful currents and disappeared, what was supposed to be a fantastic adventure turned into a tragedy. A volcanic island oasis, the Galapagos Islands. The islands are situated 906 kilometers west of the Ecuadorian mainland. The islands were first discovered in 1535 by Fray Tomas de Berlanga, the Bishop of Panama, who was visiting Peru to resolve a conflict between Francisco Pizarro and Diego de Almagro. When he returned to the Spanish Empire, he informed the people there about his recent discoveries and the island animals. The name Insular de los Galapagos, which translates to Islands of the Tortoises, was given to this collection of islands. Under the guidance of a pirate named Ambrose Cali, they created the first rough map of the islands in 1684. He also gave each island a name, some of which were given to English noblemen and royalty, others to some of his fellow pirates. The islands were taken from Spanish sovereignty in 1832 by the newly independent Republic of Ecuador, who later gave them new Spanish titles. The Galapagos Islands are a popular diving destination for divers. Divers from various groups were traveling to the Galapagos Islands on the Galapagos Aggressor II on February 11, 2010. Eloise Gale, Denise Frio, and 2 dive masters were among them. A 23-year-old kindergarten instructor from Galveston, Texas, and New York, Eloise Gale. She was a fan of diving activities. Before boarding Galapagos Aggressor II, the divers had earlier met at the baggage claim area of the San Cristobal Island Airport. Being the only 2 ladies without an accompanist led to an instant connection between Eloise and Denise. They quickly discovered that they were both from Texas too. A quick introduction to their planned dive excursion was provided to them. They all participated in a checkout dive for around 20 minutes to test and acclimate to their gear, although only down to a depth of less than 20 feet. Eloise was one of many who struggled to obtain the precise weight required for her neutral buoyancy. In highly salinized water, they were donning bulky wetsuits. They had a successful checkout dive. The divers met with Jamie, one of the dive masters, at around 6:30 a.m. on February 12, after they had finished their breakfast. Even though it was a brief briefing, he gave them the information they needed to know about the dive they were about to begin. He demonstrated their diving strategy and the layout of the dive site using a map he had prepared on a whiteboard. As the visibility was only approximately 60 feet, Jamie told them not to go any deeper than 90 feet. They were also told that the currents in the Galapagos waters used to be powerful and that they now flow in different directions. They were warned not to linger in the water for longer than an hour due to the strong current. Jamie also showed them how to return from the water into the pangas and how to surface safely around the pangas. Pangas are motorized, inflatable rubber boats that are used for exploring coastlines and going on shore excursions. 2 other divers in the group, John and Kimberly, were taken aback by the briefing. It was their first actual dive following the checkout dives they initially did the day before, so they had anticipated it to be longer than it was. The divers were separated into 2 groups after the briefing. John, Eloise, Kimberly, and 4 other divers were traveling in the same boat with them. Patricio, one of the diving masters, and the panga driver were also a part of their group. Prior to them getting into the boats, the dive master neglected to inspect their diving gear. Kimberly therefore thought that once they were inside the panga, the appropriate briefing and safety check would be conducted. When they boarded the boats, however, nothing was done. When they get to the dive site, they all simultaneously push off backward into the water as Patricio, their team dive master, instructs them to do. This was done because if everyone entered the sea at once, the panga would toss everyone remained inside around. Since Kimberly and John were both aware of their regulators, they made sure they were attached before the dive. As they stepped into the water, John looked around for his wife, Kimberly, so they reciprocated by giving each other the oak sign. Kimberly and John were located around 20 feet, 6 meters, away from dive master Patricio, and the others. When they all started diving, John didn't give Eloise a second thought. He was trying to get closer to his friend Kimberly. Patricio consistently advanced on Kimberly and John as they descended. Patricio also took the group beyond the 90-foot boundary that Jamie had earlier told them not to cross. John and Kimberly struggled against the current as they followed the team's other members. John was on the verge of hyperventilating, but as soon as he realized this, he slowed down his descent. Patricio had already approached the island by the time they had traveled for 9 minutes. He therefore gave them the go-ahead to clutch the island's sloped bottom firmly and swim upstream against the current. Due to the strong current working against them, Kimberly and John were still having trouble staying upright in the water. Kimberly recalled that she last saw Eloise about 3 to 7 minutes ago, while she was still making her way into the deep water. Kimberly and John realized that Eloise was separated from the group by the time they were able to grip onto some rocks to get some stability on the island. However, they overheard Patricio and Denise discussing a missing diver. Less than 2,000 psi of air remained in the tanks of Kimberly and John at this time. Denise was told by Patricio to hang out with the other divers on the rocks while he went in search of Eloise. Kimberly and John alerted Jamie, the second dive master, that they were running low on air, and Jamie instructed them to begin their ascent. At the 30-minute mark, they both surfaced as John grabbed Kimberly closely to prevent them from being separated by the strong current. When they finally reached the surface, they expected to see Eloise there, but they were disappointed to not see her. On the surface, they looked for her but were unsuccessful. Other divers also surfaced, and Patricio was still looking for Eloise while in a panga. John was worried about Eloise because he suspected that if she got separated from them, she could have had trouble resisting the strong current. Eloise should be noticeable at the surface because she is carrying a diver's flag. John and Kimberly began to feel optimistic that they would soon find her. The flag from the aggressor and the pangas was still being sought after on the surface. Patricio and Jamie eventually went back into the ocean to look for Eloise but were unsuccessful. The Ecuadorian Coast Guard and other vessels joined the search for Eloise, but all efforts were in vain. The remaining divers went back to the primary dive location after roughly 4 hours of scouring the surface for Eloise. However, Denise and Patricio went back to the lake in pursuit of Eloise while carrying an extra air tank. They went down to where Denise last saw Eloise, but there was a strong current. They surrendered to the current's power and followed it wherever it led. They figured Eloise had certainly experienced the same thing as well. Eloise was at 168 feet in the depths when Denise reached 150 feet. Eloise was slept peacefully while resting in the fetal position with her eyes closed. Her regulator was out of her mouth, and her mask was no longer on. Her oxygen tank still contained 2,000 psi of air when they checked it after raising her to the surface. Denise's equipment was in fine working order, but she was unsure if Eloise's 2 fins were still attached to her. All she knew was that one of the fins had been taken off when they were raising Eloise's body to the surface. Eloise's lungs don't appear to contain any water when examined. What was possible for Eloise? Around 6 to 9 minutes after the dive, it was thought that Eloise passed away. This was based on the last time Kimberly saw her, and the amount of air found in her cylinder after her body was found revealed that she may have passed away sooner than initially believed. The other divers were somewhat relieved that Denise was able to locate Eloise's body at the ocean's bottom, since they were troubled by the idea that she might have been waiting for them to save her, but they were powerless to do so. Her body was recovered without incident, and it was then given to Ecuadorian authorities. Her loving family and friends will miss Eloise always. If certain factors had been taken into mind, this dive accident might not have happened. The divers ought to have received a more thorough dive briefing before diving, so they would know what to expect. Furthermore, Patricio, one of the dive masters, ought to have controlled the speed of the descent to keep the divers from dispersing as they did. If they hadn't gone so far down, they could have avoided the strong current. We appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. If you liked what you saw, click the bell icon, like, and subscribe buttons to be notified when we post another thrilling cave diving story.